Okay, so let's take a look at what we're going to do in week 2. So there were a couple of things that were assigned in week 1. You had some graded assignments, and I asked you to work on some problems from the textbook, and then finally there was a video that I asked you to look at that comes from a TED series called Visualizing Data. So we'll take some time to look at those things briefly, and then we're going to really focus our time on Chapter 2, which is on data collection and designing surveys and samples. So as we go through the recorded lecture, what I wanted to point out to you is that I have a couple of things in the Blackboard folder for week 2. One, the slides that I'm going to cover, and then I'm going to refer to some videos, which I would strongly encourage you to take a look at, particularly if you want some amplification of information. But above and beyond that, I think that you should make sure that you've done the chapter reading, look through the slides, and watch the videos, because when you take quiz 1, anything that I put in these folders is fair game to be on the quiz. Okay, so let's take a look at what's in Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called Data Collection. So part of what we're going to talk about is what we mean by data, and so in the level in something called levels of measurement. And then we're going to look at designing a survey, sampling methodologies, and then collecting, analyzing data. And so this will tie in to your semester-long project, which I talked about in the previous video, in which you will have a chance to work on with your team throughout the balance of the semester. So what I'm hoping to do throughout the semester is to have you work on some things that relate to the materials we're covering, so they become a little more meaningful and to you as we go forward. So from a definitional perspective, we should know the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So for the first, 6 or 7 chapters, we really talk about descriptive statistics. So basically, we're talking about collecting and presenting data. And then the last couple of chapters that we cover, I think chapters 8 through 10 or 11, we'll talk about drawing inferences from the sample that we collect. And this will be important because that's one of the things that you're going to have to do in your team projects. So here's some simple examples to kind of amplify this idea of descriptive versus inferential. So descriptive would be describing something. So if I tell you the mean score of a SAT scores, or that students in the Northeast score higher in math but lower in verbal, that's one thing. But if we can draw conclusions about a particular population, so for example, what we believe is that 8% of all students taking the exam will be headed for college. Then we start to, 32% of the students scored above 610 on the SAT, and as a result, then we start to draw some conclusions and draw some inferences from the data. So more on definitions. Again, you can read through this, but essentially when we talk about data, we're talking about a data set. This is a collection of the data that in values as a whole, and then versus an observation and a subject and a variable. So one of the things that we should be clear about is the difference between a population and a sample. So when we look at a value summarizing all the data of an entire population, that's a parameter. But when we summarize sample data, that'll be a statistic. And so we'll be getting into statistical analysis a little bit later, but for right now, we're going to just focus in on some other issues. So one of the things that we'll look at when we describe data is we'll be using a tool called Megastats. And Megastats is just an Excel add-in that allows us to do some basic statistical analysis. So some of the statistical analysis we'll do with things like histograms, which you've probably come across these before. We'll do some descriptive statistics, which basically analyzes the mean, the mode, the median, standard deviations, and also allows us to do some frequency tallies. Okay, so I'll show you what these are in a second. And then when we have two variables, we're going to do some things like scatter plots, simple regression analysis, and correlation analysis. We're not going to get into multivariate more than two in this course. We wouldn't have in any case, but certainly given the losing a couple of weeks would not be possible anyway. So let's take a look here at what histograms are and descriptive statistics. So a histogram is nothing more than plotting the data values in these bar charts so that we can visually see how the data flows. So you'll see either with Excel or with Megastats, creating histograms is going to be quite simple. And then over on the right-hand side is some descriptive statistics, things like the count, the mean, the standard deviation, the range of the data. So I'm sure you know what all of these things are because you've all taken statistics, but we'll be using these tools and we'll be applying them to particular fact sets as we go forward in the semester. So a frequency table is basically just another way of summarizing data. So rather than having it shown graphically, I can have it shown in a table or numerically if you prefer. Okay, so basically it's the same data, but it's showing it in a different format. So most people find that looking at things in pictures or graphs is a little bit easier to kind of digest what the data says. But in any case, sometimes we will use these frequency tables as well. Okay, then when we have two data points, we'll have things like scatter plots and correlation analysis. So in this particular case, we'll look at trying to figure out if two things are correlated. And if they are they negatively correlated or positively correlated? And how the good does it fit around the data.